Thank you for listening. This is the Legends podcast by All Day Vinyl. And I'm your host, Scott Dudelson. After you finish this episode, please subscribe, rate it, and check us out on Instagram and YouTube at All Day Vinyl. Today, I'm excited to speak with a true legend, member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame, Musicians Hall of Fame, Grammy Hall of Fame, and my favorite, the Hammond B3 Hall of Fame, the Hammond Hall of Fame. He wrote some of the most iconic songs in the 1960s, Groovin, How Can I Be Sure, People Got to Be Free, amazing, Beautiful Morning, and so many more. I'm here with the great Felix Cavaliere of the Rascals. Thank you, Felix. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see you too, man. So let's start. You have a new album called Then and Now. So let's start with the now, and then we'll take it back to the then.
Yeah.
So new album came out late last year.
Right.
5 original songs, 5 covers, old soul songs that were, influential or favorites of yours. There's Clarence Carter, Slip Away, Benny King, Spanish Harlem, some really great ones. Now, what is the theme behind the 5 that you chose? Because there's an infinite amount of great old soul R&B. Why these 5?
Well, that's a good question because, like I say, we came up with this idea to do 5 old songs that influenced you, and then 5 new songs that you write. Very, very difficult finding 5 old songs out of 5,000 that influenced you.
Yeah.
So it really was difficult making a choice because, like I say, I grew up near New York City when Alan Freed brought rock and roll from Cleveland to New York. So I was actually present at the beginning of what we know, today is pop music, rock and roll. I heard all these phenomenal artists, and in case people don't know it, I mean, there was no auto tune in those days. You basically either sang correctly or you didn't record. So the talent was just amazing. So to pick 5 songs was very difficult. But that's pretty much what my co-producer and I, Mike Sievers, who's also my guitarist, we came up with 5.
And were these singles that you had known as a kid or as a younger man?
Yeah. These were songs that, like really like, I think you could probably, for the most part, like you could point to the artists. Like Benny King, tremendous influence on me because of the fact that his voice was just unbelievable, and he was also one of the nicest men I ever met in my life. My only regret is that I never got a chance to do a duet or something with him. He was really, really special. So pick a song. Okay, Spanish Harlem, but there's so many Benny King.
Yeah.
And then Ray Charles. I mean, as a piano player, when I heard Ray Charles, it changed everything because I was playing classical music and I heard this gospel R&B pianist, and I never had heard anything like that. And that has influenced my whole life, So to find a Ray Charles song is also not that easy because there's so many. So on and on and on. That's how I did it. And then we have a couple of obscure ones in there, like the one with Bobby Moore. That's just because we live down south now, and that was a big hit down south. I don't think it was a big hit up north, but Mike knew it because he's from South Carolina, and it's a cool song. The interesting thing about that is that uh, uh, what do you call Percy from the Led Zeppelin, man? Robert Plant just did an album with Alison Krauss, and he did that same song. So
Amazing.
yeah,
There was no you didn't know that.
no, I had no idea, but he did it. He did it kind of like a newer type of style. I kind of copied, emulated what they did. Searching for Love it's really a cool song.
I love it. And this goes back a lot to, good loving and finding the really cool singles, picking out the really great soul songs that you could interpret.
Exactly, yeah. Because in the old days, that's what was demanded of you to work in clubs. No originals. They didn't want originals for many, many years because their whole thing was to bring people there, make them dance, make them drink, and the way to do that was to do covers or what we call top 40 in those days. you know, and so they demanded that you do covers. So we had to find songs uh, that were on the radio, and I had to go and buy the 45s to prove, like for example, "Good Lovin'" and "Mustang Sally." Look, these are records, man. We didn't write these. I wish I did.
The first time you heard "Good Lovin'," was that on the radio via Alan
Yeah.
Freed or yeah?
No, it was
Oh no, that's what I
WWRL, I
sold.
believe, in New York
Yeah,
City. It was an R&B station. That was a group that I also liked. It's called the Olympics.
yeah.
But I come to find out that had been around a while before them as well, you know. And but when we took it and we put it into our live set. From the first time we played it, people just jumped out of their seats and danced. So you just never know.
Do you know that was a song when you first heard it that you could interpret and you could really do something with?
Yeah, and so did Atlantic. When we were doing that live, when they found us out in Long Island at the Barge, uh, that's one of the songs that they wanted us to release as a single, and they were absolutely right because it was a number one record instantly. You know, so good luck, good loving, good luck.
And you worked on that in the studio with Arif Mardin and Tom Dowd. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, which was
What?
magic,
I
magic.
actually have so many questions about this, but give me like a little a
Magic.
slice of the moment of what it was like being in the studio, early days with these two, soon to be legends, and you soon to be legend. How? Uh, what is this? What is that experience like?
Oh, I had a little experience in a recording studio, but not much. So it's a whole new environment. So to walk into Atlantic Records studio was kind of like, if you come from New York, it would be the Yankee dugout. you know, it
Yeah,
was like, oh my God, do you know who's been in this room right here? I mean, seriously, we're talking about John Coltrane, Ray Charles, the Drifters, you know, uh, all these phenomenal. It was like awe-inspiring, and you're in this place where this music was made, you know, and Atlantic, they just they made you feel like you're here to make good music. Okay. That's what we're here for. We want to make great music. And you just felt that the moment you walked in. And Arif was not a proven entity by any means yet. He came from Turkey, and he was like what they call an A&R man, they called him.
right.
Tommy Dowd, I knew who he was because I bought all these records and his name was on them, mostly as an engineer. But I had no idea of the extent of this man's talent. So to walk in with these gentlemen and to have to record was very interesting because one of the things that I did when we were signed is, I really wanted to produce ourselves. I didn't want anybody taking over, and as you say, that's in my book. We had to turn down some really powerful people who wanted to sign us to
Phil,
get
Phil,
that
Spec-
permission to
Phil
do it.
Spector, right? Phil
Well, Phil
Spector went to
Spector
work.
was one, yeah, but
Yeah,
all the other labels that had made offers to us, they were not going to allow us to be in charge, literally in charge, and that's and Atlantic did. So there's a lot of pressure on them. But you see, one of the things I learned from these two giants was they make you right at ease.
mm,
I mean, immediately you knew these guys were there to make good music, and let's get to work. you know. And Arif, one of the things I really learned from him was how to handle, crazy young artists like us. He was very tactful, and that's important. You create an environment for them to make music, and that's what happened. That's how we did it.
amazing. And the Rascals were the first white band signed to Atlantic Records, right?
Yeah, pretty much on the red and black label, which was pretty cool.
That is really cool. And when you were recording, did you have any experiences with some of the Atlantic artists at that time? With this would be Wilson Pickett or
Yeah, I mean, oh, sure, because Atlantic was not like a real sophisticated type of corporate venture yet. They became that way when they became Warner Brothers. So as a result, there would be people walking in the halls that were like giant legends, you know. And you see these guys walking by, and it was just amazing because like at first, like you're in awe of these people. I mean,
Yeah.
Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett, and, the phenomenal jazz players, Hubert Laws, and these guys would be walking right by the studio,
Mm.
and there was no like really restricted areas like in the Columbia studios, big signs up, recording, do not enter, et cetera, et cetera. So people mingled, you know, and that really, really, really helped because a lot of times I would see some of these guys going by, and if there were a jazz soloist, I'd say, "Hey, you guys want to play a solo on some of our stuff, man?" You know, and what a treat that was. I mean, so
Amazing.
as I say, the entire Atlantic uh, world for me was like a magic kingdom. I really enjoyed it, and I've always been thankful that we've been able to do it.
Amazing. And you put out some amazing records with them. And
Yeah,
that first record was titled and labeled as the Young Rascals, obviously later
yeah,
became the Rascals. And as a record collector, somebody who's been at tons of record stores, I have
yeah.
noticed sometimes that it's filed under Young Rascals,
I
sometimes filed
know.
under Rascals. So tell me the story of why it was Young Rascals and then
Yeah.
got to what it is.
Well, basically, we didn't really have a name, and the way the story goes is a fellow by the name of Soupy Sales gave us the name the Rascals, which is a long
Yeah.
story. To make it kind of short, uh, we wanted to be discovered, so we went to his television station. He had a hit record, and told him, look, if you need a backup band, well, we're here, you know. And he said, all these years, I never knew I needed a backup band. I said, well, you got a hit record, man. You need a backup band. He said, what's your name? We didn't have a name. So after a series of jokes, he said, well, the Rascals. So we used the Rascals. Well, okay. Well, I think our record started coming out good just before Good Lovin'. We're in California going to work at the Whiskey A Go Go, and we get a phone call from our manager. Can't use the name Rascals. Wow, what happened? Oh, there's a group called the Harmonica Rascals. They used to be on Milton Berle's show, which is, a long time ago. And they're going to be a problem. So I, meaning Sid, changed the name to Young. Well, the name of a group is kind of like naming your kid, I mean, basically, like it's kind of personal, and groups take a long time. So I didn't like it from the beginning. I don't know if anybody else liked it, but it caused a lot of confusion because there was a television show at that time.
Mhm.
And so people would say, hey, did that dog really have a circle around his eye? That's the Little Rascals. That was the inference that kind of bugged me, And
Yeah.
so when we had our hit records, I said, you know what, man, let's just change the name. Not
Uh,
thinking that they would be moving us from bin to bin in the record stores, not thinking there'll be a little bit of confusion. Thinking was, I don't know.
yeah. You're living in the
You're a
moment at
young
that
guy.
time.
You're a young guy. You know what I mean? Like you're allowed to make some crazy decisions. But anyway, so we became the Rascals.
I want to touch on that Soupy sales stuff's amazing, and
Oh yeah.
you're young at that time. How do you have the balls to just go up to somebody like this and have the confidence that your music and that you could handle this? Where does that come from at that time?
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, that's just like one of the things about coming from New York. When you come from New York, you got chutzpah, they call it.
Yeah, right.
So, we said we got to get discovered. How we also did the same with Cousin Brucey. We stormed into WABC. We said we gotta get discovered. What are we going to do? Well, let's grab Cousin Brucey and bring him down to the club. And we found out he was about 6'4". We said, "Excuse me, can we talk to you?" You're trying to find a way to get discovered.
Yeah.
And fortunately, like he, has been a friend for all those years. And Soupy, rest his soul, he was always in our corner. The
That's
thing
so
that
cool.
Soupy liked about it is that we laughed at everything he said. So he said, wow, this could work out. Sometimes I go and no one laughs. But if the band laughs, at least I feel a little better. He was great. He was a great man.
Incredible.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
And you've talked about in the book and in the past the Beatles' influence on you and
Oh yeah,
songwriting. And your manager was Sid Bernstein, who's one of the
correct.
first people to
Right.
bring the Beatles to America and to Shea Stadium. And I want to ask you because I know you were at the Shea Stadium show, which is
Oh yeah.
legendary. My father went there
Oh
15
wow.
years, and it's probably one of the highlights of his life. He's probably listening, yo, dad. So
Hey Dad.
tell me about, tell me about that experience of being being there as a young band and experiencing that Beatlemania and what that does for you.
Well, I mean, there's two parts to the story. First part being exactly what you said. There's 50,000 people screaming. You know, uh, they wouldn't stop. I mean, you could barely hear the person right next to you, much less the band who was about to play. The helicopter, you heard you. That was about it. Uh, I had witnessed them in Europe. I think from my original a trip over there with Joey D. I was able to hear the Beatles before they came to the United States, and the same thing occurred. Although that was in a club atmosphere, you know, there was a nonstop shriek from the audience because it was just unbelievable. And uh, the second part of the story is that our manager put a sign up on the scoreboard. The Rascals are coming. The Rascals are coming. The Rascals are coming. And we didn't know about it. You know, but when we saw it, we said like, wow, how cool is this? How cool is this? And of course, being in the dugout, we waved. And Brian Epstein did not like that at all. He was not happy about that. As a matter of fact, he threatened to cancel the show if that wasn't immediately taken down. So all of these different things, contributed to an evening. Your father will tell you of. It was kind of really special. It was kind of like, well, I'm here. It's kind of like Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it was over pretty quickly, also. But it was quite an experience.
Did you get an opportunity to meet them during that?
No, 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 no. They were in and out. They were on the field and then they were gone. They didn't. I don't think they stayed. I don't think they went to a dressing room. Brian did, their manager, but I just remember them. They were gone. Yeah,
And years later, just through your yogi practice with Swami, George Harrison became a confidant or somebody who helped you in that path. Is that right?
absolutely. Yeah. Well, we got to know them a number of times because of as I say, first in Europe with Joey D, and then second with Sid Bernstein having press conferences, and just kind of like it was a little bit of a mix up between the three of us, the four of us, five of us, and so you got to know them, and they were really very good guys. I mean, they were interesting people, like uh, I later toured with Ringo, who was a great guy. But one time, I said to George, because I really wanted to know about his involvement with the Maharishi. I was about to get involved with a spiritual venture with a Swami Satchidananda, and I just wanted to ask him a couple of questions. And during that conversation, I just happened to mention, I said, you have any idea how big you guys are? I mean, you have any idea what kind of a weight? In other words, if you move 3 inches to the right, the globe kind of shifts a little bit. And George was a very introspective kind of guy. He really was a very intelligent man. And he just looked down and he said, "Yeah." In other words, hey, dude, I got to carry that around with me every day. You know, and that's true. When I was on the road with Ringo, in I think it was '97. We did the Ringo Starr All Stars. For him to go to a movie, we had the whole theater. We had to He had to basically have it open privately for him. So we would go in and we'd be the only ones in the theater. That's a little difficult. I mean, it sounds like fun, but I don't know, man. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
interesting.
And around that time when the Beatles were inspiring you, you started writing your own music with Eddie, and
Right.
one of the first big hits of that was was Groovin, is that right?
Right. Yes.
Can you tell me a little about the writing sessions of how you and
Now,
Eddie began on that?
basically, because the Beatles and you know, Bob Dylan, the Kinks, Stones, Love a Spoonful, began this new venture, writing their own material. Uh, I said, well, let's do this. Let's try it. You know what I mean? So, I had been writing all my life. It's just that, as I say, we couldn't use them. Now because we had this number one smash Ola, Good Lovin', uh, we had a little wait. So I said, well, let's try it. So I brought the songs in, and basically I wanted to create where are you? There you are. I wanted to create a Lennon and McCartney situation. So I asked Eddie, who I felt was really good at the verses. In other words, I would give him the subject. I'd write all the music, and basically I'd write mostly like this is what the song is about, and then he would fill in the verses. And I just found his words to be a lot more flowery than mine. I was a little bit too serious, I thought. So for a while we had this collaboration which worked, but I wrote most of them myself and brought them in to him. And unfortunately, like it didn't stay like that because I think if you don't really enjoy the process, it becomes work, and it never was work for me. This was like a pleasure for me to do. I think Eddie kind of got bogged down a little bit, and I later found out that he asked his brother to help him out with lyrics, which we never knew.
Right, that's a
But
wild story.
and you don't know, and then in those days there was a 2 album a year minimum. I mean, like we did a lot of albums. Beatles did a lot of albums. Later years, as the artists became more and more powerful, and the gap in between albums releases would take maybe 2 or 3 years. They wouldn't do an album in 2 years. But when we did it, it was you had to do two a year. It's a lot of work. And as I say, if you enjoy that work, great. If you don't, then it becomes difficult.
Yeah,
So very interesting adventures to play.
absolutely. And when you have a song like Groovin' and you bring it to the band, you bring it to Dino and you bring it to Gene, is it fully formed, or was it the type of thing where you then flesh it fully out before you record it?
Well, basically, what I did is I established a relationship with Arif Mardin. He actually he took a rental, I believe it was, or in my old hometown, which was Pelham, New York. I would go over to his home, and I'd show him, this is what I did, man. This is what I have, and he would sit down at the piano with me and say, "That's good. I like this one. How about this? Try this," you know. And the try this was like, oh my God, how cool is that? Because one of the things about Arif, as I mentioned earlier, was this joy of making music. This was not a job. He didn't have to invite me over to his home to go through you know, the productions. Uh, he loved it, and you could tell, and his enthusiasm is just the same as you would have if you're a young person in a band. It was exactly the same, and uh, so by the time we got to the studio, uh, we really kind of knew what we were going to do, pretty much. As I say, sometimes when we get to the studio, the lyrics weren't be completed, so we had a little bit of a backlog of tracks, and we had to catch up with the lyrics. But that was just the way it was. But musically, our band basically, with the exception of the bass, which happened later, because I played the original bass on organ, and Arif said one day, "Look, like sound is getting more and more sophisticated. There's a group around here, King Curtis's band, and there's a bass player around here. His name is Chuck Rainey, and why don't we invite him in?" Well, fortunately, we invited him in for Groovin',
Yeah,
and you know, to fall in love in a studio it was an amazing, just an amazing relationship from day one, you know, but because he was a phenomenal bass player, you know, and much as I tried with my left hand and my foot, I couldn't do what he did. I mean, it was impossible. So now we had the fourth so-called member in the studio, but everybody else, Gene, Dino, myself, and Eddie, that's it. We didn't bring anybody else in except for to solo. You know, like for example, some of the horn players that were walking in halls. So the sessions were a joyous occasion for the most part, at least to me. I mean, yeah, it was work, but you know, making music that you just created and hearing it back on these wonderful speakers, you know, uh, you just say like, wow, is this really happening? You know, is this really taking place? And then as it blossomed, you know, and we had great voices. I mean, you know, Eddie, and then later we brought his brother in, who was a great singer, David.
Yeah.
It was just a magical event, and the secretaries. See, the Atlantic studios were right adjacent to the offices in those days. It wasn't a big corporate venture. You know, the secretaries would come to the door of the studio and they kind of like start dancing and stuff like you say, like, hey man, we got something here, you know. Wow. Plus, what fun. I mean, like I say, it was just a blast.
That sounds like an amazing time.
It was an amazing experience, you know, as I say. And, uh, you know, we're first so lucky to have been part of that family.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had a
Right.
run of really amazing songs that you wrote. Beautiful morning. How can I be sure? But I want to talk about one in particular that Bruce Springsteen called the definitive of his
Oh,
generation, and it's a remarkable song. People got to be free.
yeah. Well, that was an interesting song because, you know, as most people probably know, you know, your life experiences come out in your music, you know, and, you know, like if you're going through changes, you know, that comes out in your music more and more that was happening too. But this was an experience that happened to, you know, in my personal life. Uh, I was doing Robert Kennedy's campaign. You know, I was, you know, like just looking for a big change that we could perhaps make. And he was this young man who espoused a lot of the beliefs that I had in those days. And I was seeing this lady who was a part of the campaign, who was actually out there when that horrible assassination happened. And in those days, you know, we didn't have the social media, we didn't have like the internet. I had like a shortwave radio, and I was actually on vacation, and I heard this assassination had happened in Los Angeles. Oh, man. I mean, it just hit me, you know, and it's kind of like, wow, you know, everything's going to stop here, you know, everything that we've been working on, and so it came out in a song, you know, it came out in a thought, came out in a plea of what the hell is going on here, man? You know, which Marvin Gaye already did. You know, what's going on? Well, I don't know what was going on, but you know, I wonder if people know where we're at. I wonder if maybe they think we're part of this kind of what's going on today. No, let's make sure that they know where we're at. This is where we're at. All the world over, it's so easy to see. People everywhere just got to be free. End of story. And it became like an obsession, you know, got to do this. Brought it back to New York. Record company said, what are you doing? Why are you guys rocking the boat? I said, what boat? You know, we're not rocking anything. We're just telling people how we feel. It's not a good idea. Don't do it, you know? And I had a fight with them. You know, I had a fight with Jerry Wexler, you know, who was
Yeah,
cantankerous, man. And, you know,
yeah,
fortunately we had, like I said, we had so on paper creative control. But we're young kids, you know what I'm saying? And these guys were grown men and it was their label. So we went at odds all the time. Fortunately, a lot of people helped us out, you know, a lot of people on the staff, like some of the other A&R people, they say, hey man, this is a good record, man. You know, Jerry, you better pay attention. This is good, man. That's what happens behind the scenes. It could have not gone out at all,
right.
you know. And instead, it became a #1 record, not only in the United States, but in all the places in the world that at that time were oppressed, you know? And that really meant something
Amazing.
because, yeah, you're doing something besides just, putting a record out and trying to, attract flies, It's just, there's a reason that we're here on Earth, you know, and maybe that was our reason, is to say something, and boy, I tell you, it's still needed, man. I mean, it's just ridiculous. People, they don't understand that, like we're all created equal. That's what it says, when you see that Statue of Liberty. I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I
pretty
still
fundamental.
don't. Yeah.
Did you get to tour in any of those areas or overseas or abroad
We did to a
that
degree,
record?
but it was difficult in those days because, as I said earlier, Atlantic was not Warner Brothers yet. So the record companies in most of the free world, most of the world, were different. They weren't, like Columbia was Columbia all over the world. So we had to deal with that, And then when Zeppelin came over to Atlantic, it became Warner Brothers. Big difference because now your record goes out to all those countries with the same backing, Whereas we had to deal with Barclays and all these different labels. It was very, very difficult, because, you know, it's it's never been a kind of like an exact business. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that unless you look at a documentary, you never know.
Right, right. All 2020. And
Yeah,
so at that point, that was a big single, and
yeah.
a few years later is when the band started to dissolve. And you've pointed to a reason that in all of the chats I've talked with other artists and in my experiences, it comes down to ego, and
You're
seems to
right.
be one of the killers. Where at what point in the journey did you start seeing that being even if it was a nugget of something that you saw it was going to
Well,
be?
certainly right there, which was, you know, uh, basically a lot of people don't realize that sometimes your family's interventions kind of screw up the group. I mean, certainly a lot of people know that wives screw up grooves. I mean, that's been historically noted, you know. But sometimes, like a family can say, well, how come the camera was on him all the time in the show? Well, maybe he was singing the lead, that's why. Well, it should be on you, and all this kind of stuff. And it gets into your craw, so to speak. So that was kind of a turning point is that, and again, I don't mean to, I purposely left a lot of this stuff out of the book because, who cares, man? But the bottom line is that the workload was not being split 50-50 anymore. I mean, the historical precedent is, the lyrics are 50% and the music is 50%. However, that line was being crossed over by me uh, quite a bit. So I just felt that it was really unfair for me to give 50%, to a person who I really felt was not earning the 50%. Whether I was right or wrong, it didn't sit right with me, because of whatever reason, that people got to be free song caused a little bit of a problem, you know, and it caused a big problem later in life because, as I say, uh, Eddie's philosophy was very different from that. See, I live in Nashville now, and basically we do a 50-50 down here. You're right with somebody. It doesn't really matter, if you did half the lyrics or all the lyrics, because there was a contribution made. And his thought process was very different. If I write one line, it's 50%. And we ended up, I said, come on, man, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Yes, it does to him. So I don't know if you should air this. I mean, like I say, it's old business, but
Right.
it just didn't sit right. I said, come, I'm doing this, and basically, come to the table. You know, so it caused a problem. All right, well, we got over it. I mean, we went by it and we started going on, but it just continued until he finally just decided to leave.
And you guys obviously reunited for a few shows on Broadway, and I'm really happy to see that you
Well,
currently.
yeah, but like reunited, but it's just a shame, man. I mean, because you were like brothers, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and you brothers fight. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I watched Eddie and his brother David fight all the time, in the studio. But when it comes down to like legalities and things like that, that's crossing the line. I feel with the fact that we did this together. We did this together. You know, and reality has to set in at some point. So I would say, in answer your question, and as I say, I'm sure like as it goes on the airwaves, people are gonna, you know, use it against me. But the bottom line is that's what happened. You know, I mean, you come to work, man.
yeah. I mean, you lay that out very clearly in your book as well, and
Do I? I mean,
yeah, oh,
I kind of
absolutely.
skirted the issue, because just first of all, I'm embarrassed by it, tell you the truth, because I mean, like it's kind of like it's so prophetic that you start a group and then you become successful and then you destroy the group. I mean, why? you
Yeah,
know,
it's almost cliche at this point,
I
really.
mean, why? I mean, it's so silly. Okay, it's egos, but in the meantime, a lot of the English groups don't have that ego. You notice that? I don't like you. I don't like you. Well,
It's-
let's go out and make millions of dollars.
That's right. That's right.
Uh yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good idea.
totally. And I think it's very cool that you still tour with Gene. What's that experience been like?
Well, it's difficult because of like his health.
Saw that, right?
It's tough. Gene is a really interesting guy. He kind of took a lot of wrong turns in his life. You know what I'm saying? Which he wrote about in his book, in a book.
Yeah,
And as we get up to later in life, like the rule of thumb is, man, you better take care of yourself, because if you don't, it's going to be really hard on you if you have, problems, you know. And so that's what's happening. It's tough. But you see, the thing with Gene has that innate desire to be a rock and roll star. I mean, he from the first day his mom took him to a concert in Rochester, New York. That's what I want to do, Mo. That's where I want to be. So I feel that it kind of keeps him alive to have that, come on, man, let's go out there and do it, you know.
yeah.
And I think without that, I don't know, because he has to struggle, just to get there sometimes.
Well, mentally, do you feel it's the same way for you? I mean, you seem to love playing. You seem to love
Oh
writing,
yeah,
but still
I mean
creating. Is
it's
that's
we're
just
all
what
like
it is?
that. I mean,
Yeah,
Ringo's still on the road. What the heck? He doesn't need to go on the
right.
road. He doesn't need any money. You know, he's he's a rock and roll ham, man. He wants to go out there and play, and you know, uh, a lot of the older artists. It's not just the older artists. I mean, most people who play music, they get hooked. You know, this is
Absolutely.
fun. I like this. Let's do it.
And what's still inspiring you when you write? I mean, you wrote 5 new songs on the new
Yeah.
album. What is?
Well, there's a eh, I guess there's a creative part of all of us, and that to me is the fountain of youth. I mean, I find if I can keep that going, I can pretty much
Mhm.
stay, you know, relevant, you know, uh, needed. I mean, it's one thing to play, songs that you did 40 years ago. It's another thing to play songs that you just did. And I moved to Tennessee for that reason. It's very alive and well down here.
Are you still writing music regularly with folks?
Not as regular as I would like to, because it's a whole different scene now, where we used to have one or two guys, now you got five or six guys in the studio, in the writing room, and you know wait a second, we're dividing this five,
Right,
it's kind
right.
of different, and then there's all kinds of politics involved. uh it's kind of difficult to get through the morass of to get this to the artist or the producer. you know it used to be a lot more free, but people have lawsuits all the time now. Oh, well, I gave you that song and now you're using it and I don't get credit for it. So, the flow of songs has kind of slowed down a little bit because of Ed Sheeran there. My God, they sue him for like a rhythm.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, I guess there's a lot of rhythms, but that's not a song. A rhythm is not a song. Oh, yes, it is. Is it? Well, let's go to court and find out. I mean, court.
All right, we're in a litigious society.
It's really sad, man. Come on, you know. I'd
And
rather you
so,
come over and hit me in the face, you
right,
know,
like they did in the
than
1600s.
than hit me in the wallet. You know.
A couple questions before we wrap, and Felix, I really appreciate your time
Oh well,
and
thank you,
all
man. I
your great
appreciate talking.
stories. It's tremendous, man. You worked with Laura Nyro on a few
Yeah,
albums, and in the book you mention on one of the records you worked with the Muscle Shoals
yeah.
band, and you worked with Duane Allman, and you don't get much into it, but the Muscle Shoals band, they were on the great Aretha records, Dusty Springfield, all the great Atlantic stuff. Anything you could share about those experiences in the studio, working with Duane or working with? Um,
Well, Duane was in and out pretty quickly. Like he Skyman, man. He had this problem that I think Atlantic didn't want him to do sessions, so he had to change his name. Yeah, he came in, man. He did his thing. He was so good. Like when he worked with Clapton on Layla and those things. I mean, you know, really talented. See, Atlantic, what they did is it's another story. But getting back
tell
to
tell 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 what
well,
Atlantic did,
basically, what
guys.
Atlantic was aware of is that a good rhythm section makes a great record.
Yes.
So they went around and in Georgia and they tried to get the Memphis guys,
Yeah.
the Cropper and those guys, but they couldn't quite get them. But the Muscle Shoals guys, they had a rhythm section, they had a sound, and it was a good sound, and they were talented. And so they adopted these people, brought them in to do the tracks for their artists, as you mentioned, the staple singers and Aretha, and you know I think Roberta Flack. I mean, but you see, with Laura Nyro was, I hate to use the word eccentric, but she was very different, and by that I mean that we used to tell her, Laura, some of us would like to make money on this project. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you should adhere by some rules. No rules. She had no rules. Whatever she wanted to do, she did. And the Muscle Shoals guys, they were all from down south. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You want us to stop playing here and slow down? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So it was such a pleasant experience because there was none of that. What the hell is she doing? You know what I mean? What do you mean I got to play more green? She would say, yeah, it's a little bit too red. You got to make it a little bit more green. And I think if you translate that into music, there's a reason behind what, but me, so they were just perfect, you
Amazing.
know. And I miss a lot of those guys. They're not with us anymore, but you know, they were gentlemen. They were Southern gentlemen, and I think that's the one thing that I think should be, besides their talent, known.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
amazing
incredible.
guys.
And one last question,
Yeah.
because through this chat you've mentioned so many amazing encounters and experiences that you've had through your life, and you've mentioned Arif Mardin, Tom Dowd, and Jerry Wexler as people who've mentored you or been a big part of your life. And I'm curious, are there any, when you were younger, are there any artists that you met that became mentors to you and mentors to you throughout your life?
Only through their work. I mean, like I say, like Benny King and
Mm,
Ray Charles, and I mean, Fats Domino, Little Richard.
mm,
You know, uh, no, I basically had to, kind of pick up myself because these guys were, they're pretty busy, you know, but the knowledge that I got from just listening to their records, and this is one of the things I try to give. Uh, Sometimes people ask, well, what can I do to make it in the music business? I would say, like, pick up some artists that you really admire, learn what they're doing. Go out and play it in public, or play it privately, but learn what they're doing in terms of like the chops. Like there's a number of things right now, and I think it's on Amazon. Uh, there's these documentaries with people who are making music, like with Steely Dan, like Michael O'Mardian.
Hmm.
Take a look and see what these guys are about. Chuck Rainey just did one for them as well. See what they did to get where they are. Besides study, yeah, I mean you got to study. I mean, if you go in there, into this world, the more knowledge you bring in there with you, the better it's going to be for you. But there's nothing like playing experience. We get locked up with our computers these days, and it's me and my box, me and my computer, you know. Well, that's not how it is, man. You bring it out into the public, and it'll do you a lot of good.
Amazing. Well, Felix,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Congrats on the new record.
thanks, man.
Congrats on the book. I appreciate both of them. I appreciate everything you've done for music history. So thank you, brother.
Well, Scott, I appreciate what you're doing because, like I say, this is a way for us to get out into the world here these days.
Yeah,
So
man.
thank you for bringing us out into the world.
Cheers. Thank you, Felix. I'll catch
Hey,
you
take
soon.
care of yourself. Be safe out there.
Thank you. You too. I'll see you
All
soon.
right. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Legends Podcast by All Day Vinyl. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate it, share it, subscribe, and follow us and check us out at All Day Vinyl on Instagram and YouTube.